Welcome to the Wonder of Star Wars The Old Republic's Wonder Talk, a series where I'm talking about my character's background, lore, and roleplay story outside of the main playthrough. On last episode, number 20, I actually got to see something very cool in-game. I saw a guild that was actually roleplaying. It was very neat to run across them. And it's just nice to know that other players are also enjoying the story as much as me in a way, a very immersive type of way. The difference is they're doing it in a group and I'm just kind of doing it on my own with you guys. So we've covered Javiik's mom and Javiik's dad, and of course Javiik's history and his master and his master's master in previous episodes. So this week I'm going to take a bit of a break from talking about what actually has happened and have a kind of hypothetical situation. If Javiik ran into someone who would soon be entering the Sith Academy, we saw in the last episode of playthrough he was running into some Force sensitives who would be most definitely pushed into the Sith Academy if they were found out by the Empire or just outright killed. But if Javiik could not find a way to save them and had to give them advice, what kind of advice or lessons do you think that Javiik has learned from the Sith Academy that he could pass on, either from something from a specific quest or that we did, or something that he learned from the stories that we've made up in these Wonder Talks, or just something in general that you feel a Sith who's been through the Academy would learn? So what kind of advice would he give someone to soon enter the Sith Academy? But before I go, I am going to read a fun comment by Assassin's Den. Assassin's Den is our resident lore nerd who knows a lot more about the Star Wars lore than I do. I actually know very little. I remember and know quite a bit from the Old Republic, from the Knights of the Old Republic, from this game, but outside of that, it's not something that sticks in my memory or something that I've read enough to know about, so it's always nice to hear from you guys about lore in general. I can only guess there's probably more than 100 books out there. There's all the comics, there's all the different games, there's of course the movies themselves, there's role-playing games, there is the new TV series, so much out there. Between all of us, I'm sure we know everything, but individually we know very little, except for Assassin's Den, apparently. So this is what they had to say. Stand back, citizen! The lore nerd is here to help you. Okay, so I've got a few things to cover. The first is the easy one. Cathar rituals regarding marriage and name changes. As Cathar only exists in legends so far, the only thing we know come from there. And the only Cathar married couple we saw were Credo and Silvar from the Tales of the Jedi comics. For those of you who remember the episode when we were trying to figure out what Javiik's mom looked like, I think we actually had a picture of those two. They were very pale, kind of goldeny, creamy colored Silvari from the Tales of the Jedi comics. And their last names were not spoken in the comics, nor were they written in the entries that were written about them in the West End game books written about their era. So there's no solid info on how they handle surnames and marriages. And we had that really interesting comment from last Wonder Talk where there was different examples of how people took their names in Star Wars. Some keep it, some hyphenate it, some don't change it. So I guess if you're trying to pick your Cathar's last name, do whatever the heck you want. I'm just going to stick with Veda because I'm lazy and I don't feel like figuring something else out. Assassin's Den continues. Second, Dathomir. Dathomir actually has two histories. The Legends history and the TCW, the Clone Wars, New Canon history. What you spoke about was the Clone Wars New Canon. The Legends canon, which is the canon that Swtor deals with, is far different. At this point in history, the well-known witches of Dathomir don't exist yet. They won't exist until 600 BBY, a full 2,900 plus years after the events of the game. At this point, Dathomir's dominant species were the Kui and the Rancor. The Kui are very much like dinosaurs and are like blue velociraptors from the Jurassic Park movies. They are semi-sentient and the descendants of Kwa who warred with their kata around 100,000 BBY. So where does this leave us? This is me talking on Assassins. We're kind of in a weird state because I said Javiik's father went off to help the Dathomir in the war. I was under the impression, I believe I'm still correct, that Dathomir was one of the planets involved in the current or past war rather, the recent one, and I picked it because it was also close to Cathar, and I thought that would be kind of cool. The bad news is, if I understand what Assassin's Den is saying, there is no Night Sisters on Dathomir to go save. There is no Zabraks there. There is semi-sentient species and Rancors. So I'm not exactly sure who exactly we're going to save there. I'm gonna go stick with resources, I guess. A war fought over resources. Maybe Javik's idealistic father thought he was gonna go trying to save some people, and he turns out it's just a resource war. Actually kind of sounds like something that might happen, so let's maybe even keep that canon. He gets there and he's trying to save blue velociraptors. So Assassin's Den had some more info about the Battle of Dathomir. As for the Battle of Dathomir that happened before the Cold War, there's not much about that, but I can think of a reason for it. Dathomiri fauna are huge animals, huge, powerful, and very hardy. A bull rancor, which is itself massive compared to its brethren, is at least twice as tall and 4 times as massive if it came from Dathomir than anywhere else. These creatures would be considered excellent to be converted into Sith spawn, and the Jedi would know that, so the Empire could attack the world for raw materials for Sith spawn, and the Jedi-led Republic could be fighting against them to prevent them from getting said resources. And that is a super cool and fun idea. And that is what is nice about working in the era of the Old Republic. You have a lot more leeway to decide what happens in the story. So, as Assassin's Den pointed out, we actually don't know too much about the Battle of Dathomir. We know it happened. We know it happened before the Cold War. That's about it. So, you could decide what happens in your story. You can't like force that idea on anyone else if they want to make up their own story about what happened in the Battle of Dathomir. You can't be like, my version's right. There's no codex entry about it or anything like that. But if you're just writing for yourself, especially, just have fun, go for it. It's not like the current Star Wars era where every person has been meticulously plotted out where they are at every single time of every hour of every day. So, last one from Assassin's Den. And finally, the Witches of Dathomir. Now, even though they won't exist for 2,900 plus more years, their history is very different than what the Clone Wars shows us. First off, they're the descendants of Jedi who were banished to Dathomir, and their entire society has one rule above all others: never concede to evil. The Night Sisters are an offshoot who had members of all tribes who fell to the dark side and defied that law. There are no Night Brothers since males were barred from being anything more than breeding stock for women. Their Book of Law, since it was written by a former Jedi, is based heavily on the Jedi Code. These witches eventually contributed to members into the Luke Skywalker's new Jedi Order, including Kirana T and Tenel Kadjo, and even had a Jedi Academy installed there after the Yuuzhan Vong War. Quite different than the Night Sisters-dominated world of TCW. No? And with that, the day is saved, lore nerd away. So that is a very interesting comment, because as Assassin's Den pointed out, there is a huge difference in the way Dathomir is treated in canon and legends. And once again, because if you're writing for yourself, you have a lot more leeway. You could even choose which canon you wanted to follow. Technically, one is the canon that Disney has decided, and one is the Legends canon, and so you can decide to follow the true canon, or the canon of the game that we're currently playing is in the Legends status. So once again, have fun. And so they're both really interesting stories. I think we covered the other side of Dathomir on one of the previous episodes, and now we know the other half too. I don't think it matters too much specifically for our current case of Javiik Daddy, Raithan Habada, but it's neat to know that there is a difference, and that he's going to go with some blue velociraptors. Okay, I'm done with lore for now. I hope you guys have a good day, and let me know what kind of lessons you think that Javiik has learned, and that he would pass on to a new entrant into the Sith Academy. See you guys later. Bye!